all having to do with that. Okay, grammar deep dive this week. A couple of things I want to go over that you'll see in your work in the days that will be assigned for this week. Reflexive pronouns. These are pronouns that reflect back on the antecedent. They're a specific group of pronouns: myself, herself, himself, yourself, itself, ourselves, and themselves. They are, I should have said usually they're usually set off by commas if they are in a position, I'm sorry, they are set off by commas if they are in a position of emphasis, which is often how they are used. They're not generally, they can come in other places in the sentence, but they're often in a position of emphasis. So for example, this is one that's not, we fix the problem with our internet ourselves. It's not really necessary to the sentence. None of these reflexive pronouns really are. We could have said we fixed the problem with our internet and it would have been fine. It's just, it adds a little bit more clarity to say how we fixed it, so that pronoun is, that's why it's there. This one, however, is in a position of emphasis. She herself will give the speech. There's no real reason for it. I mean, again, it's just emphasizing that she will give the speech. And in that case, because it kind of interrupts the flow of the sentence, it's set off by commas. Remember we discussed that, I think, last week. When you have anything that kind of just interrupts the sentence, we set it off with commas just because it makes it a little bit more clear that this isn't an essential part of the sentence. One of the biggest mistakes that people make with reflexive pronouns is using them as subjects. They should never be used as a subject. Always have to have an antecedent, and again, usually in that situation of emphasis. This is a very common mistake that people made. My dad and myself took a trip to the Grand Canyon, and I think the reason that it happens is that people are trying to sound a little more formal, or maybe just a little more highbrow, and it doesn't. It makes it clear that you don't know your grammar. So never use them this way. My dad and myself. It should be my dad and I took a trip to the Grand Canyon. So they are not pronouns that can be used as subject pronouns or as predicate nominatives. They're only to be used as a kind of a re-emphasis or a restating or in input places of clarity. Okay, double negatives. This is probably not an area of trouble for most of you, just because your ear will pick up. You know that you should never use two negative words in the same clause. So the words specifically that you should avoid using together are no, not, nt, never, none, nobody, no one, nothing, hardly, or scarcely. And the only time that you may have it may just become tricky is when you're using a contraction with int, don't, or can't, or won't. So for example, we don't hardly ever see our family in Nebraska. You can just get rid of the don't. We hardly ever see our family in Nebraska is perfectly fine and gets your point across. So it's just not necessary there. Nobody has nothing to do this afternoon. If you actually think about that, two negatives, like in algebra, two negatives equal a positive. So if nobody has nothing to do this afternoon, so you could actually say that sentence and it would be grammatically correct if what you were trying to express is that there is nobody that has nothing to do. So like if everyone has something to do, because that's what that's actually saying, is that everybody has something to do. So nobody has nothing to do. Everybody has something to do. So it's just better to say everybody has something to do rather than nobody has nothing, just because it makes it a little bit fuzzy and unclear what you're trying to express. So change nothing to anything in that situation. Nobody has anything to do this afternoon, if that's what you're trying to say. If you're trying to say that everyone's super busy, then nobody has nothing would be at least appropriate in that situation. All right, the active voice versus the passive voice when we're talking about verbs. The active voice of the verb shows the subject. I'm sorry, you can't see because my camera's in the way. They're doing something. Passive voice shows something or someone being acted upon. The passive voice usually uses the past participle form of the verb, and I'm not really sure what that dash is doing there, so sorry about that. Here's the example. Here's the active. Mom drove us to the store. The subject, mom, is doing the driving. So the verb is drove. Mom is the subject, drove is the verb, and the subject is actually doing the verb. That's the active voice. Passive voice that expresses the same idea here is we were driven to the store by mom. Okay, shows the same situation, and in this case, by mom is at the end of the sentence as a prepositional phrase showing who it was that did the driving. So it's showing the same, it's getting across the same point, it's just doing it in a passive way because we, as the subject, are not actually doing the verb. The verb is being done to us. A little more on this. In general, the active voice is more clear and succinct, so it's preferred. When you're writing, it's better to write in the active voice. Sometimes it's not real possible. Sometimes you have to write in the passive voice, but it's more clear. It makes it and succinct. Remember when you're writing, when you're looking at how to express ideas, the fewer words that you can use, the more clarity you can bring with the least amount of words, the better. So to change it, you often just need to rearrange the subject and some objects, direct object, indirect object, and possibly objects of the preposition. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that. The snowballs were thrown at me by my brothers. Okay? It's not grammatically incorrect. It's just a little bit fuzzy and funky. To make it better, you just change that by my brothers, make them the subject because they're the ones doing the throwing. My brothers threw snowballs at me. Okay, notice both of these are past tense. This were thrown is your past participle, and threw is just the past tense simple. Some more examples here. Our snowman was destroyed by our dog. Now this is a situation where that's a fine sentence. There's nothing. It's pretty clear. But to make it active, you would just say, our dog destroyed our snowman, which is a little bit more clear and succinct. This one is really clunky, and you would probably never say this way, but it's just an example. Mugs of hot cocoa with marshmallows were prepared for us by our mom. Our mom prepared hot cocoa with marshmallows for us is just a better way of saying that. That's active voice and passive voice. And I honestly can't remember precisely how this comes up in your days. I don't know if it gives you sentences and has you determine whether it's active or passive, but the trick to that is finding your subject and finding your verb and just asking yourself, is the subject doing the verb? Like, is the subject actually performing the action of that verb? If that's the case, it's an active voice. The subject of the sentence, what the sentence is about, is not doing the verb, but the verb is being done to the subject, then it's passive. So that's kind of the key with those. All right, so in class we were going to do days 92 and 93. It would be good practice for you to go through those, but obviously we won't be checking them. You're not responsible for it. You can glance over it, especially if it goes over any of the things that we just discussed. Good practice. It would be good practice just to do that. So it's my recommendation, but I'm not holding you accountable for that at all. Okay, vocabulary. We have our lessons 9 and 10 review this week. So the sad part is that we're not together to do a game to review all of these words, but the quiz will be available basically as soon as I post this. It'll all go live on LMS, and you're welcome to take it at anytime you're ready for it. Make sure that you review all of those words, all of the different parts of speech that those words, forms that they can take, all the different definitions of the words. And also I think, didn't I say last week we only have like 5 Latin roots? Make sure that you're familiar with those, the definitions of those and everything, so that you can be ready for it. And we're just going to go through the game. Obviously, it's a way less, it's anticlimactic and way less fun since you're not doing it together. But it will be less competitive because you're just, competing with yourself. So good luck, everyone. And remember that those quizzes for vocabulary are closed notes. So when you're ready to take it, just make sure you put your vocabulary book away. And you need to do it by next Monday. So anytime between now and next Monday before we join together in class on Tuesday is fine. Okay, so question 1. The pianist has a large blank of pieces he can perform. Propose repertoire or specimen. I don't have my game show music. I should, You're looking for what repertoire there. Remember, that's the collection of pieces that he can perform. Number 2, the graduating seniors enjoyed a blank of their time in high school, vigil, speculation, or retrospection. You're looking for retrospection there. That's when you're looking back and thinking and kind of memories. Just having, oh, okay, there's Eli. um, yeah, so retrospection is what you do, kind of looking back and having, a time of, and that you've probably ever had a moment like this in your life just yet, but you will here in a few years when you graduate from high school and you think back to your time. So anyway, that's what you're looking for. Number 3. Here's our first analogy. Reticent is to extrovert as ostentatious is to modest, improvised is to unplanned, vigilant is to careful. Okay, you're looking for an opposite there because somebody who is reticent is not an extrovert. Reticent meaning sort of, cautious, hangs back, not really someone to jump in and get involved with things. And ostentatious is certainly an opposite of modest there. Ostentatious would be, loud and kind of showy, looking for attention, whereas modest is much less, more just modest, keeping keeping things to oneself, not really looking for attention, that kind of thing. So there you were looking for these two were opposites. The first in the example were opposites, so you were looking for a pair that were opposites, and that's the only one that really fits that. Okay, the blank of the storm hung in the air as the clouds approached. Surveillance, visionary, or specter. We're going to go with specter of the clouds of the storm. And it's just sort of the ominous kind of presence that's it's not quite there, but it's almost there. So specter is like a ghost. It's not quite there, but it's almost there. That's what a specter implies. Okay, number 5. Which of the following is a derivative of spectospectatum? This one was hopefully pretty easy for you because that SP is your clue there. So speculate is the best answer, the only answer. Okay. She missed practice blank due to sickness, although she was fine the next morning. Refutably due to sickness, ostensibly due to sickness, or introspectively due to sickness. This one's ostensibly. Ostensibly means kind of the given reason, like so this would be that this was the excuse that was made, but it's not. It's usually pretty suspicious. There's something suspect about it. It's not real. It seems a little fishy. Okay. Refutably is when you can actually refute it. So if somebody was able to offer complete evidence that this was wrong, and that's not what's implied here. This was she said she was sick. That's the context of that. All right, repose is to rest, as refute is to confirm, speculate is to discuss, reiterate is to repeat. Okay, so you're looking to decide what is the relationship between repose and rest there. Okay, repose and rest are synonyms. So we're saying, repose is just another way of saying rest. So we're looking for synonyms, a synonym pair in our options, and reiterate is to repeat is the best one there. You might have made a case for speculate is to discuss. There is sort of a context for that, but speculate is really kind of it's discussing might be an aspect of speculating, but it's not really a full synonym. They're just kind of related, but not true synonyms. All right, number 8. Which of the following is not a derivative of videovisum? Improvise, surveillance, visionary. Okay, despite all of 3 of them having a V, this one, surveillance, is the one that is not video visum. Improvise, visionary, both of them have the VIS, which is a little bit more of a clue there. All right, just a couple more here. The comic is known for his blank with guests on his late night show. repartee, introspection, speculation. Using your context clues here is important because comics are, a comic would kind of interact with his audience, would have kind of a sort of a persona of just engaging with them, and that's what repartee means. Repartee is where you kind of can engage in a dialogue and put on have sort of a make the um, I don't know, have a way with making the jokes on the fly. What is that? Stand up is shoot. It's too early. The term is just flying away from it. Improvisation. There it is. And that's kind of the idea behind repartee, is that you just sort of have this improvisational dialogue. And so comic was kind of a good context clue for the word we were looking for there. Make sure you do that when you're doing your quiz. Make sure you read the sentence and look at all of those words. Look at all of look at the context of the entire sentence to make sure that you're finding the word that fits best in the entire context of the sentence, not just the blank that you're looking at. All right, last one here. There is a diverse blank of opinions about favorite types of ice cream. Improvisation, vigilance, or spectrum. This is another one where context clues is helpful. You're looking for a device. So if you're talking about opinions about favorite types of ice cream, that would run the gamut, right? Some people like plain, like vanilla and chocolate. Some people like really fancy, crazy ones that don't sound very good to me, but so you've got a diverse spectrum. Okay, so it runs, all kinds of, there's from this all the way to this. That's what a spectrum implies. Okay, so like I said, you've got the whole week to get this quiz done whenever you need to. Make sure you're reviewing through your book and all those, all the exercises. If you haven't gotten the exercises checked, if your parents haven't checked through them, have them go back and check their emails for the last couple of weeks to find the correct answers and make sure you get those corrected, because if you're not reviewing and studying corrected materials, it's not going to help you be prepared. Make sure that you get those checked and know what the correct answers are, so they can be helpful to you for the quiz. Okay. Obviously, we're not there to discuss the story of my life. I hope that you've enjoyed that first section of chapters. I'm interested, and we'll talk through them next week. Hear sort of what your perspective on, what your insights were about the first part of her life, her experiences losing her sight and hearing, and then what that was like for her when she was able to begin communicating while working with Anne Sullivan. Again, to me, this is the most exciting, kind of interesting part of the novel. Unfortunately, the next couple sections are a little dry, so there are reading response questions for that. It's not as many chapters next, because I think they're a little bit longer. I can't remember how many it is, maybe. So there is another set of reading response questions that will be posted to LMS for you to go through after you read through those chapters. But just know that I know it's getting a little harder. So I don't feel like the reading response questions are quite as deep, because I'm not sure how much you're going to glean from a lot of this, but there are a couple highlighted things that we'll talk about next week as when we gather back together, and we'll discuss the whole, the novel or the book up to the point of where we're through chapter 23, I think, where you have to read 15 to 23. That sounds right. Anyway, we'll talk about all that next week. Okay. I wanted to discuss the research essay or expository research essay that you're working on. Hopefully last week you kind of chose your topic. Again, as a review, if you don't remember, and if you didn't really do any of that this week, you're going to research a device or a program or a methodology that's been designed, invented or designed to help people with a specific disability. You need to, be thinking through. Last week, what I had assigned for you to do was to think through just describing the disability, but then thinking through some questions about what is it that you want to research. What questions do you have about, who designed it or who came up with it? When did this happen? What has, what's kind of been the benefit to people with that disability. So hopefully you made yourself a little bit of a list of research questions, and this week it's time to start researching. So you need to remember, and it's not quite as important with this particular topic, just because you're probably not going to come up with a ton of opinion about the device or methodology or whatever. It's not, but there might be some. Um, so anyway, you want to make sure that when you're choosing your sources, that you consider fact and opinion, as well as a writer's bias. And there's nothing wrong with actually reading through those kinds of sources that are somebody's opinion or their bias. You just need to make sure that you're keeping in mind that this person is biased. For example, if you're reading a source that's an advocacy group for a certain disability or a people group with a certain disability, that's a bias, and it's not bad. Everybody has biases. We all biases. We all have our opinions about things, and there's nothing wrong with reading those and kind of using those to help inform your thinking about it. But you just need to make sure that you're aware that some of the things they might be saying, because when you have a bias, when you have an opinion, facts that you are using, you might be leaving out other facts. Keep that in mind as you're doing this. And this is mostly, again, for this topic, this is not quite as significant for other kinds of research papers, though it is really important that you recognize what kind of sources, whether you're looking at a factual source or a source that's more biased and more opinionated. So for a research report, accurate information from reliable sources is important. For the purposes of this essay, you may use sources that contain bias or opinion. Just be sure that you relay the opinion as such. For example, in the opinion of some experts, or arguably, that's a good way of kind of saying this is what some people think about this, but it's not, just to sort of indicate that this is not necessarily proven fact or accepted fact, but this is the opinion of some of these people who have studied this or used this or whatever. Okay. Good sources of information can be internet sites or books. Like we said last week, it's probably mostly internet sites for the purposes of this research essay, because your books are not, I mean, there might, for some of these older methodologies or programs like Braille or American Sign Language, there might be books that are written that could be helpful. But a lot of the things that have been more modern developments, your best source is in internet. And at this point in our day and age, internet is probably the best source regardless, because there's so much more information located on the internet. But you do have to make sure that you're using quality sources. Blogs and Wikipedia are not generally the best sources for accuracy. We talked about that a little bit last week. However, they often will contain links to the source material that confirms your information, and that can be considered reliable. So if they, for example, Wikipedia articles, I think I mentioned this last week, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of a Wikipedia article, good Wikipedia articles, and there are good Wikipedia articles. I'm not trying to completely bash Wikipedia. It's just that it can be, it's debatable, and it's not always reliable. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's garbage. But at the bottom of the Wikipedia article, there might be works cited there or sources that are cited, and those could be links to other more reputable information. So that's the value of Wikipedia, is because it does kind of gather up those things for you, but the information itself, you just have to remember, because it's sort of crowdsourced. People can go in and change it or leave out certain things, so it's not always just a factual, source of information. So you can go to those links at the bottom. That can be considered reliable. So other potential sources that you could be finding some information in are medical journals, scholarly magazines, or sites related to the disability or device program methodology you're researching. Again, some of those will have some bias and opinions, so you need to keep that in mind, but they might also have links to other sources that would give you just actual information that you can use. All right. As you read the articles, identify key ideas that relate to your topic that you want to include in your paper. This is the note-taking process. And I know probably you have done, I'm hoping at this point everybody has done at least some kind of research writing before, so you know kind of what you're looking at. But when you are one of the biggest mistakes that people make, especially when you're new at writing research papers, it's kind of writing down irrelevant things. It's not, you need to really hone your, you think when you're reading through a source, make sure that you're thinking, what is really important here that I need to know and communicate? Or what is it? What's the, and that's really why your research questions are kind of important so that you can be a little bit more specific about what the information that you take from a source. You don't need to copy everything from a source. You don't need to, you shouldn't, because then it's not your work, it's that source's work. Because if you're just copying everything from a source, even if you're putting it in your own words, that's not, and there's not your purpose here. You have a very defined purpose of what you're supposed to be looking for research wise. You need to define what the disability is, describe it, define what it is that what was invented or created or developed to kind of meet the needs of that disability. Who was it that did that? When did this happen? What have been the benefits of that to the people with that disability? So you have a very specific kind of research plan just in your assignment guide. So you're not, I mean, probably not going to find anything that addresses each of those things, point by point. That's your job. So you're finding those pieces of information from those sources. So make sure that you're looking for those key ideas, finding the answer to your question, and that's what you want to be writing down. That's your notes, not irrelevant information that's just not that it doesn't have anything to do with the purposes of our assignment here. When you're taking notes, I mean, you can do this however you want. If you have a thing for index cards and want to have your stack of index cards and write your notes handwritten on there, that's great. That's not what I would recommend. I would recommend kind of splitting your screen, doing a split screen, on one side having a document, a Word document or whatever your word processor is open, and either copying and pasting, literally copying and pasting into the Word document for your note taking. Just remember to use quotation marks if you do that, or highlight it or something so that you know that was copied directly from the source. Yes, that would be my recommendation. Or just summarizing as you read a piece of key information. So as you read a paragraph that kind of answers one of your questions, just type your note in on your, just take notes, bullet points, however you want to do it. That's my recommendation of how to take notes. If you want to do it on, notebook paper and do it that way, that's fine. The benefit of doing it on a Word document or a word processing document is that you can also just copy over the URL of the website that you're on so that you don't have to write all that down. It's much, it saves you from, accidentally mistyping or miscopying one letter or missing something, and then you can't access that site again to find the source information. So anyway, I recommend doing your note taking that way, but you do however you take notes best. The key here, though, we talked about this a little bit last week, is to use quotation marks if you're copying directly from a source. It's fine to summarize or paraphrase the information to use in your paper as long as you cite the source on your works cited page. Any information that you use that comes from a source, it needs to be cited. You need to cite that source to give them credit for it. This is how we avoid plagiarism. One second. Sorry, I want to make sure I could keep talking here without coughing. Remember that much of the information that you will relate in your research paper will not be your own knowledge. This isn't coming from your own brain. Some of it might, especially if you have a friend or a family member, a loved one who has this disability and you've seen firsthand how it's helped them. So that is your knowledge, and that's fine. But most of this information is coming from another source. At this point in the process, you should make sure that you separate actual quotes, so quoted information from your sources, from paraphrased or summarized information, and give credit to your sources in all cases. It is fine to summarize or paraphrase information without using quotes, and as long as that information as long as you are citing that source where you got it on your works cited page. You don't have to do it in the text at this point. We will be doing that for our research paper later on in the semester, but I'm not going to require that of you right now, where you would, as soon as you, like in a paragraph, as soon as you include information that was from a source, you would use in parentheses the name of that source. We're not going to do that for this time. We'll get to that later. You just need to remember that if you have used a source information from somebody other than your brain, they need to land on the works cited page. That's why keeping up with your sources is really, really important. Do not do any research without first copying the URL, writing it down, copying and pasting it into your, you can even start yourself a works cited page if you want to. We can format it later to be the correct format, but just make sure that you're getting the information from your sources so that you can cite them on that works cited page at the end of the process. That's just really, really important. It's very easy to plagiarize without meaning to, and I'm just trying to show you the steps of that you can take to avoid that so that you don't have to worry about it. So again, whenever you're using more than, I think the kind of the rule of thumb is more than 4 or 5 words in a row. Like if you use a phrase, a full sentence, it needs to be in quotation marks. If you just sort of summarize an idea that you've read about it and you've absorbed it, so now it's your idea that you're putting it in your own words, you don't need to use quotation marks. But if it's more than 4-ish words in a row of that source material, you need to put it in quotation marks. Also want to use this. I want you to try to avoid this scenario, but I'm just letting you know that because for the purposes of literary writing, later on when you get into high school and you're having to do like literary analysis where you're quoting passages of a novel or of a work, whenever you get to more than, oh goodness, I think it's more than 3 or 4 lines of quoted material, it gets indented into its own paragraph to kind of set it apart. That's not, you should not have that in this situation. If you have more than a couple of sentences, you need to rework that so that it's not in your own words. We'll get to that. I'm sorry, it is in your own words. It's not such a long quote. We'll talk about that more when we get to the rough draft, but just kind of be aware as you're taking notes. It's fine to go ahead and summarize and paraphrase right now as you're taking notes. Anything that does come straight from those sources, though, needs to be in quotation marks so that you know it's there word for word from what they said. Okay, so that's the process this week, is to start on the note-taking process. I don't remember how many days we have, how many weeks. My guess is it's probably this week is the one that's primarily allocated for note-taking. So I would go ahead and get started on that, get the research going, so that we can discuss kind of pulling that into a more together rough draft next week and week. All right, so homework for me this week. You've got grammar days 94 to 97, no quiz. Again, I will collect that quiz number 9, quiz 9 next week. So if you haven't gotten it done, you got an extra week. Make sure you have that for me next week, though. You've got the vocabulary lesson 9 and 10 quiz online. It's just like it was last semester. It's a Google Forms quiz. There'll be a link to it up on LMS in its own separate post. Remember, you can only take that one time. There's no like redoing. It's one submission. So you can go back before you submit it. If you need to go back and change your answers, that's fine. But once you submit it, that's it. And then Story of My Life, chapters 15 to 23. Then there are reading response questions posted on LMS. Again, it'll all be live by the time you are viewing this. And then use your research questions to research and take notes for your research essay. So that's what you have for me this week. And that's all I have for you guys this morning. And look at that. We came in at 34 minutes. So again, if there's any questions that you have, anything that you're not quite clear on or that you need more instruction on, please don't hesitate to email. I'm happy to answer any questions I can. And I look forward to seeing you all in class next week, next Tuesday. Have a great rest of your day and take care.